rat lines are not my strongest skill when it comes to doing wooden ships. I've got to be honest. We've all got something that we wish we had a better skill at. But the more you do them, the easier they become. But it is one of those, for me at least, one of those more tedious tasks. I guess it's because you've got lots of them that you have to repeat. Now for doing the spacings, I like to use this little card strip, so when I put my next one on I can tie it on and then adjust it just using this as a height gauge, and that works fine. You don't need a whole sheet of paper with lines on and stuff, because actually it's just getting in the way of you passing your line through the back. I see lots of people doing it. I have tried it, doesn't really work for me. So that's how I go about it in terms of sequence. But the reality is, because I find it a bit tedious, I'll do a bit of the rat lines and then I'll go and do something else. So I've got 2 backstays to do, so I'm likely to do those backstays as well. Now I'm doing one on camera, one off camera. So with my shrouds and rat lines done on this side, I can put my backstays on this side without filming them, so I just get a bit closer a bit quicker, and then we'll film the ones on this side, which will be the last of the work we have to do with blocks, and then we've got anchors and doors and the final display stand to do. So we are nearly there. But I want to get through these rat lines, to be honest. So put some music on, put a film on in the background, put your favourite YouTube channel on, and just whack away at them until they're done, is the best way forward. Now I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing shrouds. I'm going to recompose the camera and we'll do them lower down where you can see them. Okay, really difficult to get the camera to focus on these lines, so I'm hoping this is going to come out okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you 2 different ways of doing the rat lines, and I'm going to show you how I space them out. So I space them out with a bit of card. So the gap on the plans is 6mm. So I use this card, which I've cut to 6mm wide, to get the depth between the knots. Yep. So this bit of card, you can see, is to help the camera focus. It's not part of the tool that I use for rigging. All I do for the rat lines is tie the knots and then adjust their position, then glue them in. So we don't have card behind with lines on or anything like that, because I find it generally gets in the way. So yeah. Right, so you're going to need 2 tweezers to do this job. We're going to start by putting the first knot on, and the first knot is just a simple ordinary knot. So we tie that like so, and then we shorten the distance of your leg of line that's sticking out here, and we pull that tight. Don't worry about how tight you pull it, because it loosens up a little bit as soon as you've done that, and then you can adjust the position up and down. What I would say though is you want to be tying it a bit higher than you need, so that you adjust it down, not adjust it up, because that will pinch your lines in a little bit, and you want to avoid that. So that's about right. We'll fine adjust it when we come to do the gluing. Right, first way of doing them is the proper way, and it's the way that is shown on the instruction sheet. So on plan sheet, rigging plan 1, plan sheet 12. So you start, I always find the second knot is the hardest because you've got the longest length of line. You start by going around the back of your rigging line, of your shroud, which then makes a loop. So once you've got your loop, your line needs to cross over the top of this first line that passes over the top of the shroud, and then tuck behind it. So we're going behind the shroud, like so. Then your line is going behind the line here, behind the rat line, and then going through this loop between the shroud and the loop, like so. And you should find that's adjustable as well. I find I get problems with it not tightening, however, so I'm going to show you what I do, which is not massively dissimilar, but is a bit quicker and tightens better. And although it's not authentic, nobody's really going to notice the difference. So let me undo this and I'll talk you through how this works. So we do exactly the same thing as we do at the start of the knot I just shown you. So you go past your shroud, make a loop, and this time, rather than having to go round the back and through, we stay on the front and just pass through the loop. So we're making another basic knot like we did on the first shroud. And then when you've got it nearly tight, you just pull it, and that should give you a little bit of slack between your knots. It's also easier to undo if you feel that you haven't quite got it right. So I'm just going to show you that one more time. So you grab the thread, take it round the back of the shroud, go underneath your loop that you've created, through the top, pull it tight, be careful that you're not pinching your shroud line in, and then hold the two rat line threads to pull it tight. And I find that quicker, easier, and tends to unravel less. So it's not that dissimilar. It does look slightly different, but no one's going to be scrutinising your knots and going, hang on, that's not historically correct. If you want to do them historically correct, it will take a little bit longer, but it's just patience. But I think for beginners, this is possibly the best way to go. It looks fairly nice and neat when it's done, and then all you do is get your 6mm piece of card, adjust the knot heights, and then a quick dab of CA glue, and that's locked into place. Then what I do is start tying the first knot of the next rat line, and once I've tied that knot, I know that my glue has dried on the previous rat line and I can trim the length. And this long overhang here I can use for some of the rat lines at the top where I need a lot less thread. And that's how I do my rat lines. Pull that tight. The first one's loosened, so pull that tight as well. Get them next to each other, and a little blob of glue. So I like to have the glue on the knot and also on the line to make sure nothing's going to move. That's sort of my way of working with these things. So we should be able to trim the lines on this first one. Okay, and then we take that off, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on here just to make sure that the block doesn't pop out, because that can happen. So the way to do that is a little bit of glue along the block and the line, and then immediately wipe it off so you've got no staining or anything like that. So there's two things: you don't want it to stain and you don't want it to be shiny. So there we go. And now we should be able to trim off these lines as well. So there we go. That's our block done and ready. So we just need to trim this. Okay, all good. Yep, happy with that. And then when we paint that black, it sort of disappears into it anyway. So next thing we've got to do is get the length about right. So we'll go back to our plan for that. So we know that our block needs to be about that long from the bottom of this. So it needs to go round and it needs to tie off. Now, what we can, we have one of these on both sides, by the way, so we are making two of these. I'll just do one on camera. So what we're going to do to make sure we get the length about right is we're just going to put a little bit of tape on the line just at the bottom of this wooden part here. It's only approximation, doesn't matter if it's out slightly, you know, who's going to know. But it gives us a rough idea. We want this to look right at the end of the day. So we've now got a marker on the line and we know we need to tie it off. So I'm actually going to tie this onto the line, onto this here. I think is my plan. We'll wrap it round and then it's getting a bit difficult to get in there. There's a lot going on there because we've got the upper boom stuff going on. So although this comes out from the side, it is a little tricky to get in there. So we've got two ways of doing it. We can either sort of tie it on, glue it down, trim it in place, or we can seize it like we've seized the block. It's up to you, whichever way you're going to find easy, but let's see how we get on. Either way, I don't need a lot of line after this point, so we'll just make sure we've got enough. So I'm going to make a second one of these, and then I'm going to come back to you when we install the first one. So I have my blocks made up for this here, and we're ready to attach these lines, so I can put those to one side. What I want to do next is make up this block arrangement here, which we can see blown up here. So we've got two blocks, an A and a B, so that's a 3 and a 4 millimeter single block, and what we want to do is strop all that together. So let's have a look at that. Right then, so we need two blocks because we've got this going on both sides. So we need two of these smallest single blocks that we've got. So we get those out, two of those, and that's F9s, and then the bigger block is an F10. And we need two of those, so we've got those out as well. Okay, so when we look at this, we've got a loop that we are fastening to here. Then we're going around that. Then we need to have something that fastens that together. Then we're going around that and cutting it off. So first thing we need to do is make a loop. So it doesn't tell us what thread size to use for doing the block. So let's we're going to use a black thread, I think. And given the size of the block, I'm using F17, so that's 0.25 black thread that we're going to use. So let's get going. I don't know how much we're going to need, but not that much. So we're going to start by making a loop. So I'm just going to roughly get this line in half and put it round our little 2-pin jig. Like so. And if I put a little clamp on just to hold it all together, there we go. And I'm going to use the F14 thread and we'll dye it up. So I'm going to use a normal knot on this. So we'll make a loop. This will be the easiest way of doing this, I think. and we just feed that through the loop like so, and we can tighten that up and just get it to the point where we're getting it to grab, and then we can push that up to make our desired loop, which is only small, and just pull that tight. And if you hold it down with your fingers, that will stay tight while you put a tiny dab of CA on. Now I generally use medium CA because it dries out more slowly on the where I've got it decanted on a little bottle top, but it's quick setting and it soaks in, so you don't need to be using thin, is the point that I'm making. So give that a moment to trim off, but we can now pinch the block in and glue the block into that, so that's the next step. Okay, so with the knot done, we've just glued this into the block into the thread there, so you can see that's hanging on okay. So that means we can now put that in our tweezers and just hold that there, and the next job is to just tie this around. So just put a little bit of glue on the end there and pull that tight. Now if you want to do a second knot, you could do, which will give you a bit more distance between the blocks. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so we can make a loop now, because this is how we're going to finish this last block. So get the block in place. And just pull that thread tight. It's not always the easiest thing to do. There you go, just to prove a point. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm pinching the sides and just moving that knot round to the front there, so that the knot's on top where we want it to be. Pinch the sides. I can let go of that one, and we can use a clamp just to hold the sides of the little block, which allows me then to get the knot tied. I hope that all made sense, and I hope I didn't get it off camera. Right, so a little dab of medium CA, pull the line tight while that sinks in. Okay. That's all good. So that's our block assembly done. So all we need to do now is trim off these lines. Okay, so that's our block ready to go. And you can see how that looks side on, exactly like in the plan. So that's ready for the line to be attached to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach that line. So that is N3, so that's our largest of our natural threads. So let's go and do that. So with this thread we want to have a little bit of line for seizing to the blocks, and then we want to have a little bit of line for seizing to the eye, and then we want to estimate how much line we need by tracing the pattern of the plan. So if I just get that into shot for a moment. Sorry, I've got so much stuff on my bench, it's really difficult to maneuver things, but there we go. So a length of line for seizing, a length of line for seizing, then from the eye up to the block, through the block, back down, and a bit for good luck, and we chop that off. And as a rule, I probably said this before, but I'll just keep reiterating, when you're seizing these lines, use the thinnest line you've got. We'll do more about that in the next build, the Lady Eleanor, when we start focusing on improving on the basics. Okay, so just going to thread our line through our little eye. Oh, I've woken up this morning with a runny nose and a cough. I'm wondering if it's hay fever. I didn't ever used to suffer from hay fever, but in recent years I get a touch. Usually in August, so this would be a little bit early for me to be having it, but okay, so we've got our line threaded through. So we'll just clamp that so it doesn't spring apart. There we go. And we can put the block in one of those, and then we're ready for seizing that on. And as I look at the plans, I can see there is no obvious seizing, so it's probably spliced on the real ship. So I'll probably do, well, let's see how we go. We'll tie one on and see what we think. So I'm going to do the quick knot method. Put our loop underneath. Make sure that's in the right place. There we go. And slide that up to our knot, pull it tight again. And a bit of CA. Pull it tight while that glue's drying, and we know it's all good. Okay, and that should be good now. Yeah, it's not moving, so I can trim that off like so. So that's looking good. And then, do I want to do a second one? Yeah, I think I do. I'm going to move that down so it's a fair bit closer than I normally do. So about 2 lines width away. I'll hold that down with my fingers. I know that's nice and tight. Little dab of glue. Okay, I'll just give that a sec. Take my clip off now. And we can trim this down. I'll show you a different method of cleaning these up when we're on the next build. Okay, that's our line attached to our block. That's all looking good. I'm happy with that. So I need to go and do attach the other one and make up another set of blocks. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll have a look at finishing this assembly. Okay, so we've got 4 of our blocks all seized up, ready to go. So the last thing we've got to do now is do the block that attaches here. So this is another small single block, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a loop, attach it to that block, and then leave ourselves a line so we can tie the block onto the eye, and then we can attach this line, the N2, which is 0.25 natural thread. So we can have that as long as we like. We've got to leave plenty of line for tightening and fixing to the cleat. But we can attach it to the block before we tie the block on, which will be easier than trying to seize that on after we've got the block installed. So that's the next thing to do. Create that block and the line that goes with it. And then we're ready for installing onto the ship. So again, I'm using F17, our thinnest black line for the block. So we need enough to make a loop and enough to tie around the block and enough to then tie onto the ship. So we've got plenty of thread, so don't skimp on it and be struggling to tie really tight knots because you've not got enough line. Okay, going to show you a slightly different way of making the eye rather than using our jig, which has performed so well. And the whole idea of the jig is that you get uniformity, but in this first build I'm trying to show you different methods so that you can find the one that works for you going forward on your builds. So what we're going to do is I've basically just folded that line in half, and we're going to just make a basic knot, almost like we were going to put the block in, and then we close that loop up until we get it to the size of the eye that we want. So big enough to get a line through, small enough to not look odd. Okay, So we can now get our block, and we're just going to leave that as the loop. So we can now get our block, put the block up against the eye and pinch the block. Now you have to be careful not to over tighten it, but what you can see as I pinch this block is that that loop is already sat on the top. Now it looks a slightly different shape than when we put it round the 2 pins and then tie it off. It's not quite as circular, but it does the job. So I thought I'd show you that method as well. So pinch the block, a little bit of CA on each one of the lines against the block there. That'll just help keep that in place. Always wipe your glue off straight away so that you've not got any witness of it. It'll have already soaked in enough anyway. Okay, so we can now hold that in a clamp, a crocodile clip. I'm going to use my self-locking tweezers, and then we can tie a knot as we'd ordinarily do under the block. Nice and tight. Hold the lines down to keep it tight, and a bit more glue. Just pull those tight while that glue dries, and that block's ready to be installed now. We will use the 2 lines that are coming off to tie that onto the eye that we've already got mounted on the side of the ship there. There you go. So that's that block done. So that's ready to be installed. Now we don't need all of that line, so just to make life a bit easier for myself, I'm going to shorten that one a little bit, and we'll simply tie that on with a simple knot and a little bit of glue, have it in the right position, and that block is ready to go. So I'm going to do the other one off camera. That's all of our blocks done then, so we're ready to install. Okay, this is probably the most difficult thing that we have to do. I've just noticed a thread I've not cut as I'm talking. In terms of it being really quite fiddly to work in this area here. There's a lot of lines going on, there's a lot of things happening, but we should be okay. So I'm going to show you how I go about it anyway. Like I say, it's a bit fiddly. So we've got to put this backstay line in. So we're going to start by threading it round the post, getting it through the gap, using my tweezers just to thread it round and then grabbing hold of it. And we've got our little bit of tape which is going to give us the height that we need to be at, which is about there. And then I'm just going to put a little peg on it just to hold the lines together. I've managed to get it tangled. There we go. Okay, now it's easier if we put a little bit of weight on the line so that it's being held taut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some weighted scissors, these things here, and just clamp it on. So anything you've got as a bit of a weight. So on both lines, you can see I've clamped together both lines, and then I'm carefully letting that dangle, and we can take the peg off now. And I'm not just dropping it, I'm slowly letting go of it so I know it behaves okay and doesn't clang into anything and cause any damage. So I've got 2 lines here. I've got to make sure that they're over the block okay, which they are. Right, so now we need to make tie a knot and seize it up. So the best way to do that is to start down here where we've got a little bit more wriggle room and then slide it up. So with the aid of my tweezers, I'm just going to pass it around the back, make sure it's not grabbing any other lines and that you just got the lines that you want to tie off. It's very easy to, some of these natural threads, you can't see them so well, and when you're concentrating on the line that you're putting on, you don't always see what's happening elsewhere. I mean, it's happened to me a few times on this build that I've grabbed the line accidentally, and also because I've got my magnifying glasses on, my peripheral vision sort of decreases and I'm always bumping into lines, so it is a little bit fiddly. Right, now we've got the knot tied, but it's in a big loop, which allows us to move that up, get it over the bit of tape, there we go, and now we can get in and if needs be do it with 2 tweezers, just pull it a bit tighter and move it up. There we go. So that is in position and it's nice and tight. Now to ensure it stays tight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a clip on one side of the line just to weight it down, like that. And then I've got put a little bit of glue on it, and then with my free hand I can just pull this other line so I know it's nice and tight whilst the glue's just drying off there. There you go. So I'll just give that a sec. Doesn't need anything more than that. We can take our masking tape off now. And I can also take the weight off the line. And now with tweezers I want to grab the short end. That's the long end, so we're just going to hang that over the upper boom so it's out of the way. I can see what I'm doing. There we go. And we can take this weight off because the glue will have dried on that knot. Now if you feel like you want to put a second knot on, you can do that. Otherwise we're just trimming up. So grabbing the short line, getting in with my scissors right up to the knot as best I can, making sure I'm not cutting anything else. I've done that as well before now. Okay, and then our seizing line can get cut. Now you'll see that this moves about. That's exactly what I want because I want it to adjust itself as it gets tightened. So that is our first line on. we need to change the camera angle to see what else is happening. Okay, so the next task is to add our block onto this eye here. So I'm going to start by threading the line through the eye. Where's my tweezers? Okay, then we'll just make a simple knot, get that relatively tight, and then as we've done before, we pass this line back through the hole so that the knot can sit inside the eye. There we go. So just pull that through. And then when it's nearly tight, we can put a little bit of glue on the knot, tighten it up, and that'll fix it into place. So a little bit of CA, put it on the knotted area, then we pull our lines tight, get our block up in the air a little bit, there we go, that should be okay. So we can leave that to dry, and then this line here, what I'm doing is I'm just going to drape it over the cat head at the front so that it's out of my way while I'm working, because it's quite a long line, needlessly long to be honest, longer than it needs to be. I've done the other side as a test run, so I'm a bit more confident about talking you through it, so I think we know what we're doing now. Right, okay, so that's that line on. Now, this other line with the double block on, that hangs through the line we've just added and then terminates there. This will be one of the last things we do. We'll terminate and then we'll tighten. But we need to thread it through the block, and what we need to do is pull our line so it's sort of in the right place and not twisted, and understand which side the hole is going to face when this is tied up. Then we need to pass our needle threader through the hole. We've got to make sure that we do it from the right side. I know that sounds odd, but the block is going to dangle on this side, so we need to be threading it through so that the block's on the right side. There we go. Take the eye threader off. Now, that can now be threaded through the eye at the bottom, ready for seizing, but we don't want to tie that off just yet, but just gets us into the right place. Okay, so the next thing we've got to do is get the length right on this block, and to do that it would be helpful to have the rigging threads through there so everything's being held into the right place. So I want to get these lines out of the way first, so we're just going to trim them up because the glue will have dried now. So just get right up as close as I can to the knot. There we go, that's those lines out of the way. So our line here that comes off this block, it goes up to the small block first. So again, we've got to get orientation right. So it goes up to the first block and then back down and through that block. So it's going to come up so that it's on that side going up and then coming back down closer to the bow. So we just have to be mindful of that to make sure that we don't have the block twisted. You'll be surprised if you do it the wrong way, you'll instantly know, because it will twist the line and it won't look right. And the first few times you do it, you're wondering what's going on and why it's not sitting right, and then after a while you work it out and then you know for the future. So if we'd threaded it through the other way, this block would have been turned like that and it would be wanting to turn back all the time, and that would have made all our threads look a bit odd. So we've got our line through the first block. It's now going to come back down through here. So let's thread it through. Find the end of my line, there it is. Okay, and then we can pull that taut, make sure it's not wrapping around any cannons. You'd be amazed how you can rip stuff off. Again, been there. Okay, so that is in. Don't need to worry about it being tight just yet. We'll tension it in a mo. Right, so we're now going through this top block again, making sure we're threading it through the right side. And we'll just drag that through. Okay, and then this line now is going to tie off on the cleat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it shorter so it's a bit more usable, and we're going to get this block in the right distance from this block here. So using my steel rule on the plans, the distance between those two blocks is 35 millimeters. So what I can do, because I've got this block sort of roughly in the right place now, I know I can't move the height of this block now, so I'm measuring 35 from the bottom of the block, and I know that this needs to come up to meet it, so it's quite far off. So I'm just going to heighten that a little bit. Check my measurement again. Yeah, another 10 millimeters yet. I think that's looking about right. Yeah, so there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a weight on that for now, which will keep that taut. Now we can tension this setup here. So 2 tweezers is the best way of doing that. Couldn't find my other tweezers for a sec. So we start by pulling this line down, and then this line up, and then this line down. Now that's not fully tensioned yet, but what we're going to do is we're going to put a weight on that and leave that like that. We can now tie this one and get that tied up. So I'm going to just drop the weight a little bit lower, like so, and we can tie that up. So I'm using the F14 thread, the N1. And I'm going to use a little crocodile clip, if I can find one, or a peg will do, and just clamp the threads together while I tie it off. There we go. So I can quickly tie this off now, glue that into place, and we're done. So let's get my tweezers. Get my loop round, tweezers through, tighten that up, hold it tight, a little bit of glue, hold that for a sec, and we'll do another one a little further up. Exactly the same process. There we go. Hold that tight. Little spot of glue. And we should be able to trim that first one now. And I can take the peg off and trim the length of that line. And now trim that knot. Okay, that line is done and it's nice and tight. So all we've got to do now is tighten that. So I'm going to do that with the weight on, get it as tight as I can, and then we're going to tie it off on the cleat. So I'm going to start by pulling it at the top here on this thread, try and stay out of the camera, and then at the bottom on that one. So following the direction of the thread, and because we've got a weight on there, every time I slacken it and give it some slack, the weight will automatically pull it down and tighten it. So that's nice and tight now, and it's looking great. So I'm going to move the camera, move the model so I can see what I'm doing, and hopefully I can find an angle for you to see what I'm doing too. Okay, let's see if we can do this on camera. We get some quite nice challenges trying to do these things on camera, don't we? Right, so I'm going to grab the line so that we're keeping it tight and take the clip off, and then going in with my other tweezers, I can get the line around the back of that cleat and pull it tight. And then what I'm trying and not managing to do, because there's so many lines in front of me now, is just wrap that round the back there like that. There we go. Nope, thought I had it and I hadn't. There we go. And then I can come round. Losing it. There we go. You lose grip on your tweezers. I don't even know if you can see any of this. I won't know until I'm editing. There we go. Ah, just all undid. Would you believe it? Right. I've got that on. While I'm holding it with my tweezers, I'm going to get some glue on the knot there so that if the worst happens, it doesn't all slacken off and what have you. We've effectively done it now. Now I'll show you when we come to do the next series, when we come to do the Lady Eleanor, I'll show you how to make ropes so you can dangle them over the front of this and that sort of stuff and really improve the look of what we're doing. So we've been building this out of the box using the materials supplied, and in the next build we'll show you how to improve what you get in the box. Again, using primarily what you've got in the box. Right, that'll just sit there for a moment while that glue's drying, but that is effectively done, which means the only thing we've got left to do rigging wise is the upper backstay, and we're going to do that next.